Welcome to the Main Allure podcast. I am your host, Laura, your unofficial mentor and motivator. Have you ever walked into a room and said something and then immediately after thought, wait a minute, did that really sound the way I wanted it to sound? Or maybe you've met someone who has absolutely no clue on how they come across. And spoiler alert, if you happen to not really know anyone who is lacking self-awareness, then maybe it's you. Okay? Don't kill the messenger. So today we're diving into self-awareness, what it is, how it impacts the people around us, and how to do a little vibe check once in a while, just to make sure that we're not looking crazy out there. All right, let's get into it. So what is self-awareness anyway? Well, self-awareness is basically being in tune to your own thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It's also realizing how those behaviors affect others. And according to psychologist Tasha Urich's research, 95% of people think that they're self-aware, when in reality, only about 10 to 50% actually are. And that's kind of scary, isn't it? I mean, when you think about it, we all think that we're just all self-aware and, super conscious about the world. But when you think about the 10 to 15%, that's a really low number when you think about it, especially because it's not just about knowing yourself. It's also a way for you to understand how you show up in the world. Why does that matter? It's very simple. Self-awareness creates better relationships. So whenever you're self-aware, you tend to communicate with a clearer sense of who you are. Your opinions are more articulated. You have more intention in the way that you express yourself. And as a result, you end up having less fights. You're less argumentative. You're more agreeable. And it's also easier to resolve conflicts when you're dealing with someone who is self-aware. The other thing is that you also become a stronger leader. And when it comes to the workplace or even in situations when you're in a group, it creates a sense of, and this has been, I believe, Harvard Business Review did an article on this that found that self-awareness is actually a top predictor of success, especially at work. And the reason for this is that you are more in tune to the people around you. You tend to be more inclusive with the way that others are showing up in a group space, right? And as a result, you tend to take their feelings and their needs into account. So obviously, it doesn't matter where we are. We always want to feel like we belong. And as a result, when you have someone who is a strong leader and who is actually very self-aware, they tend to catch on the different cues that exist. They understand when someone is being cooperative or not. They value collaboration. They like to get ideas from everyone in the room, right? Like these are different things that not only help you as a leader, but also helps the business. Because if you're not paying attention to what others are saying, right? You're only paying attention to your own ego, the chances are you're not really fully understanding the big picture, and that could eventually harm the bottom line. So again, strong leaders also have strong self-awareness. The other thing is that you also develop more empathy because when you understand your own emotions, you're less likely to snap at people, okay? We're not going to talk too much about that, but it's true. You're less likely to snap at others, and you're more likely to be supportive. You tend to put yourself in other people's shoes. Then there's the idea of less stress. In 2008, there was a study done by Frontiers in Psychology, which showed that self-awareness practices lower stress and boost emotional intelligence. And the reason for this is that whenever you're more self-aware, you're actually understanding really what is worth your time and what isn't, right? So arguing with people back and forth is a smart thing to do. Sure, if it's necessary. But when it's when it's unprovoked, when it is unnecessary, when maybe it's just a discussion that needs to be had, then that in itself could create less stress. Now, here are some ways where lack of self-awareness could potentially cause you a lot more stress than you think and that you even realize. And here are some signs that if you're doing any of these, chances are that you're lacking in self-awareness. It's probably causing you more stress that you need to have. So it's a good time to reflect and evaluate on these. So again, don't kill the messenger. I'm just telling you the facts and how you could potentially improve a little bit in this department. And so here we go. So the first one is you like to dominate the conversation. If you're someone who is always the one yapping, if you're a yapper and every time there's a meeting, you're the one that's always talking, unless you're presenting something, obviously. But if you're the one that's always feels like you need to have, your opinions need to be known, well known. You have to express how you feel all the time. You don't like other people express themselves. And even when they do, you interrupt them. And then you have to tell them how you feel. You have to tell them to them straight. And we see this on social media all the time when there's people who just want to go back and forth with you and you're like, oh, I don't have the time. Next, right? So that's one. Number two is you don't acknowledge the feelings of others and basically you lack empathy. What I mean by that is maybe there's someone who comes to you and they say, oh my God, I'm so stressed and I'm so tired. I'm like, absolutely, I've been working a lot these days. And the first thing you tell them is like, oh, wow, that's crazy. Well, do you mind driving me an hour from here so I could pick up my, anything like that? And you lack a little self-awareness because they're obviously telling you and expressing to you about how tired they are. And then you completely ignore their feelings and seek to have them serve your needs, right? That is a huge red flag. Number three is you become defensive when people call you out on your BS. Maybe there's something that you're doing that people don't like, right? We're not all, everything's not all sunshines and rainbows. So once in a while, you're going to do something that people are not going to like. And that's okay, right? But if somebody decides to tell you about it, if somebody decides to call you out on it, and the first thing you do is say, well, but, right? And it doesn't matter what the but is. The truth is that somebody somewhere, like somebody has expressed their own needs, right? If they're telling you that something is making them uncomfortable or frustrated or angry, chances are that these are their feelings. It doesn't matter how you feel about it, okay? Because your feelings are valid no matter how it comes across, as long as you're being reasonable. And so when you're expressing them or somebody's expressing those feelings to you and you decide that, well, get over it, or they start making excuses, then obviously you're lacking self-awareness. The fourth one is lacking accountability, which is kind of tied to the last one. And again, this is when you start shifting the blame. Maybe you went to a party and you didn't bring the ice. And you say, well, what happened to the ice? Where is it? What happened to the drinks? And they say, I thought someone else was supposed to bring it. Or I figured someone else would bring it. Why are you only relying on me? So obviously, if somebody assigned you to do something or somebody was expecting something from you because it was discussed, but yet when they tell you that they're disappointed, the first thing that you do is shift the blame, then yes, you're lacking self-awareness. The fifth one is emotional dysregulation, or that whole idea of somebody calling you out on something that you did or something that they're not happy about. And the first thing that you do is you get angry, you start yelling at them. And by the way, that's also a huge sign that you're guilty. So if somebody's telling you, hey, why are you doing this? And the first thing that you do is get angry and upset, it looks a little suspicious. So again, pay attention to your I call them little sensing antennas where you can tell and then see how others are feeling. And this is how you can also learn to read the room, right? So that's an idea where not only do you have to know, okay, I am upset right now, I am angry about something, But this is not the right time for me to blow off a fuse. So it's time for me to perhaps wait it out and wait till later. And one example could be maybe there's a friend of yours who is currently going through a big breakup. And it just so happens that over the weekend, you get engaged and you're marrying the love of your life. And when you meet for coffee, this person is crying out to you and telling you how upset they are. And someone with self-awareness would say, okay, I know that I'm very happy about my situation, but my friend is upset. She's crying, or, he's crying, whoever it is. And maybe this is the time for me to just be there for them and listen out. I will let them know another time. So you could wait a week or two when they're kind of feeling a little better and say, hey, by the way, I wanted to tell you this a few weeks ago, but I know that you were upset and I didn't want to upset you even more by talking about something that was good that was happening in my life. So I decided to wait until now to let you know. And I think that most people will understand. I'm not going to be like, oh, wow, I'm sorry that you're feeling upset and you're crying and you're devastated and you want to bury your head into the ground. But by the way, I'm getting married. I'm getting engaged. Isn't that great? Isn't that lovely? Well, absolutely. That means that you lack some self-awareness. And that's all I can say about that. The other one is having the need to outdo others. We see this sometimes in friendship groups or even at work where there's always somebody who feels like they need to outdo you, right, in some way. If you're wearing a nice shirt, they feel like they need to wear a better one. If you're dancing with a guy you like, no, they feel like they need to grab him and dance with him too. There's like certain things, certain behaviors that make you side-eye people sometimes when they do them. And you're like, wait a minute. What are your intentions? And so when people start to question your intentions or question your behaviors, it's probably a sign that you lack self-awareness somehow and you need to check your little antennas eventually just to make sure they're still working. All right. So the last one is you don't feel the need to change or improve. And what I mean by that is, regardless of what's going on, if people, again, mentioning all of the things that I just said, if for some reason you feel like it's not a problem, like if people are upset that you hurt their feelings and you feel like you don't need to change that, you feel like you didn't do anything wrong, it's time to self-reflect and look within and see what it is that's causing that. And sometimes we have to be honest with ourselves. Am I functioning from a place of ego to the point where I am not realizing how my behavior is affecting other people? Then yes. So if you have any of these, chances are you're functioning with your ego at the forefront, and it's time to check yourself. Now, what are some ways that you can check yourself? And one way that you can do that is doing I believe it's called the mirror test, which is where you ask yourself, if someone said this to me, how would I feel? And it's basically kind of turning the mirror to look at yourself. If you're talking mean to someone, or if you're insulting someone, or if you're sitting in traffic and somebody just happened to cut you off and you're saying all these crazy things, is that something that you would tell yourself? You could also do quick journaling, which is where you could grab some stickies or however you want to do that and write down one thing you did today that helped someone else, as well as one thing you did that you could have done better. And I know that in the tech world, if you're if you're a techie like me, we do retros all the time. I actually recommend people do this with their own lives, where you say, okay, what is the one thing that's going well? What is the one thing that's not going well? And what is one thing that I should keep doing? It actually works in any scenario. So I highly recommend it. It's a good way to reflect on your behaviors, on the things that are going on in your life that perhaps you're not really stopping to think about, but are definitely either impacting you or someone else. So try out retros. I love them. The other one is doing a friend check. If you want to, retros are things that you could do with yourself, but the friend check is perhaps finding someone, a close friend, someone that you trust. Okay, don't go to some acquaintance who likes to tell it like it is, and then before you know it, you're crying in the bathroom. Absolutely not. Okay. Make sure that you find somebody who speaks your language, first of all, but who also likes and appreciates you in a way that when they give you feedback, you know that it's coming from a good place. Ask a close friend, what is one thing that I do that I don't notice? And you'd be surprised, right? You'd be surprised what people may tell you. Then you'd be like, oh, wow, really? I didn't realize that I did that. I will give you a warning. Sometimes you have to prepare yourself, have a little bit of a thick skin because you may not like what you hear. But again, like I said, make sure that it's somebody that you trust, that if they say something to you, they're going to say it with good intentions. The next one is using the pause button. So whenever you are going through a situation, I recommend that before reacting, you take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I about to respond or am I about to react? So I know that social media is full of people who react about everything. And I will be honest, I am one of those people who I will see something and right away I'm like, I write like whole paragraphs and then I pause and I say, is this really worth my time? And most of the time it's not. So I go ahead and delete it and say, okay, moving on. Let me keep going. Because once you react, then who knows what could happen as a result. You start building more things and people will react to your reaction and then it becomes a whole back and forth that you don't really want. And it's just, again, going to create more stress. So I guarantee you, always use the pause button when you need to, and it will save you from a lot of trouble. Trust me. Now, the last one is that digital detox. I've spoken about this before, about the absolute need to detox from digital media, social media, all of these things once in a while, because it does have that influence on you and how it affects your mood, it affects your behaviors. So notice how much of your mood is being influenced by scrolling through all of this content all of the time. And you'll start to notice that your awareness starts with observation. And you will see, because if you start seeing the same behaviors over and over and over, they kind of become polarizing and they also become normalized in some way. With a digital detox, you kind of step back and you take that time back to yourself so that you could understand who you are, first of all. You take your time back, your power back, and then you start to see and observe things in a different way. Whereas if you're just always online, always seeing content from people complaining all the time or people just always having an opinion about something, then you will start to kind of become affected by that. Yeah, as a result, make sure that you follow these tips, understand them. There's definitely a lot to be learned about self-awareness, and my definite advice to you is to make sure that those little antennas, those self-awareness antennas are always running so that you can definitely evaluate and reflect on how you're showing up in the world and how those behaviors can affect other people and how their behavior affects you, right? Because if someone's behavior is affecting you, chances are that your behavior is also affecting them. All right, so before we close out, I wanted to give you a podcast update. So next week, I will be releasing episode 20. And then I will be taking a small break to gather myself. So as you already know, I am someone who loves to do a lot of things at once. Little me just can't sit down and just save her life. And I have a lot going on in these next few months. So I need to take a break in order to not burn myself out. So I spoke about that maybe 2 episodes ago. So it would be a little hypocritical of me to sit here and tell you, hey, don't burn out, and then go ahead and burn myself out. So my plan is to release 20 episodes at a time. So this is going to be my goal going forward. I definitely want to reach 100 episodes. So I will be sticking around. So I'm only at 20, but my goal is to release 20 episodes at a time so that I can create a good pace for myself and not burn myself out. But don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I will be back on December 1st. Okay, so that's when that new series, that new season will start. So make sure to follow me wherever you listen to this podcast. I do have a YouTube channel, The Main Allure, where I will be also sharing things here and there. Who knows? Maybe I'll show my face there. We'll see. Again, I'm a private person, so as you've probably already noticed. I'm a very private person. I'm not an influencer by any means. I'm not making money off of this. I'm basically doing it because I love to give back and I wanted to find a way to do so, at least, in this way. So also, if there is anything that you'd like me to cover in the next following episodes, in the next 20 episodes going forward, please email me. My email is themainallure@gmail.com. So make sure to keep it cute. But you can, however, leave stories. If there's any feedback that you have, or even if there's any advice that you would like me to give you, I am very open to that. I'm a mom, I'm a career woman, so there's definitely a lot that I've experienced. And I feel like if there's any way that I can help someone just get through something, I would absolutely be willing to do that. So feel free to reach out, themainallure@gmail.com. Again, I'm just a regular girl who wants to make a difference. This is a community that I hope you can feel safe and seen as you listen to every week. So yes, stay tuned for more because more is coming. All right, in closing, self-awareness isn't about being perfect. It is, however, about being present fully. When we understand ourselves better, we show up better for others. And when we show up better for others, then that means that life just gets easier, smoother, and definitely a lot more fun. So maybe next time, before we hit send on that spicy text or social media post, or before we roll our eyes in a meeting, or whatever, let's do a little vibe check first. Check them little antennas, make sure that they're working so that you're not looking crazy out there. Because trust me, people listen and they do judge. All right, so today's challenge is to ask one person in your life, what's something I do that makes you feel good? And what's something I do that maybe I don't notice? Make sure to take that feedback, reflect, and always leave room for growth. That is it for today. Thank you for listening to the Main Allure podcast. I am your host, Laura. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, share this with someone who you feel might need a little bit of reminder about self-awareness. And we'll be chatting next week on episode 20, our last episode for this series. Until next time. Take care of yourself. Bye.